We're rolling live. All right. My name's Brad. This is Rock and Roll Vagabonds YouTube channel, where I come to hang out and talk about music that I love. Got that huge passion for music going, starting off as a little kid, listening to mom and dad's music, and all through the elementary school years. And then, around high school is when you start developing your own tastes in music and kind of forging your own path. And you know what? I just figured we'll start up a YouTube channel that pertains primarily to, maybe not exclusively, but primarily musical content. So I figured, do we want to introduce myself, give you guys a little bit of background on it. Now, first and foremost, I can't play any instruments at all. I do have a bass guitar sitting right here that I can do a few riffs on, and I like to play around with every once in a while. But honestly, I just don't have the dedication necessary to become like an actual bass player. I'll leave that for those that can. And I'll be the happy guy in the audience just sitting there watching. Live music is my thing. Rock and Roll Vagabonds, that is basically myself, my wife, and my daughter. Our big thing that we do as a family is we travel around going to see concerts. It's a hell of a life. Love it. And, so thinking of a name for this channel, I just figured, why not Rock and Roll Vagabonds? We kind of do a lot of travel and running around, and check it out. So it seems kind of fitting for what we're doing. And thought it'd be all like cheeky and smart. We instead of VAGA for the Vagabonds, we went VEGA as a nod to Serwin Vega speakers because they're awesome. I feel like if we named the YouTube channel something like Serwin Vagabonds, we'd probably get sued to hell. So cheers, Galaxy. I hope you're doing well, dude. Great to see you hanging out here with me, man. I appreciate the support, truly do. So like me personally, I'm a huge metalhead. I listen to a lot of rock and roll in general, but I'd say primarily metalhead. Now I didn't get into metal till high school. I was the like late bloomer, I guess you say, because my parents didn't listen to nothing heavy. I had an older brother that got me into like 80s hair metal and stuff like that, which was cool as hell. But like my dad, he's from the 70s, so like stuff like Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Queen, Skinner, all that great stuff from back in the day. My mom has been more of like, or back then at least, was primarily into pop music, whereas like Milli Vanilli and stuff like that. I remember when she got that one on vinyl record. It was funny. Now actually I have that vinyl record on record because when I moved out, I stole a bunch of mom and dad's records. They didn't listen to them anymore, and I only had CDs, or a few hundred CDs at least, and so I could vastly increase my music collection if I poached mom and dad's music collection as well. It was a great plan, and it worked out well. If only we could foresee the days where we'd have things like StreamYard, YouTube Music, where you can put where you just put like all your songs on your phone. I can't even find my phone at the moment. Not sure. Oh, there it is, right in front of me, camouflaging. Right, put all your music on here. And think of the size of my music collection. It's huge. I probably got about 1,000 CDs in it right now, and hundreds of vinyl records, and all of that plus so much more just goes on here. It's crazy to me. I love and hate technology at the same time. So I remember my first favorite song, like my first kind of musical memory, but I don't remember it. It is vague, but I remember my very first favorite song being Bryan Adams' "Summer of '69." That I got my first real 16 or six string, bought it at the 5 and dime. That guy, and that was my jam for quite a few years growing up, and got into a lot of the other songs like "Everywhere You Go," "Kids Want to Rock." that was pretty cool stuff for as a kid. And then started listening to a little bit of Aerosmith and whatnot. Remember my parents when I was in like probably about grade two or three, getting me my first Walkman, a blue Walkman with like a Beach Boys greatest hits tape in it. And I used to run around jamming that, and then getting into mom and dad's tape collection and getting in through that. I remember like David and David Boomtown was one of the tapes that I'd stealing out of there. Some Journey and stuff like that. And it was always okay, but nothing in there that like truly ever was like, yeah, that's like really my thing, you know. And in grade three, I remember getting my first tape that was actually mine to pick out and buy because this is the cassette era thing. Talking like probably late 80s, like 88, 89, somewhere in and around there. And my first tape was because my friend Chris had just gotten tape from this group earlier, was DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. He's the DJ, I'm the rapper. And that's had Nightmare on My Street, Parents Just Don't Understand, and a bunch of other really great stuff. That was the first one that was mine. Turned me into, this is my music collection. Absolutely loved it. I ended up trading it to my brother for different tape for CD years down the road, I recall, but I can't remember what the trade was. But that was kind of, Will Smith wasn't cool to listen to anymore at that point in time. So he still cared about like trendy music, I guess. So much, not so much anymore. Having troubles with your buffering, that's not good. I don't like to hear that. Hopefully it's not stuff on my end going on. It very well could be with this computer. Who knows? We shall see. Hopefully it gets better. It was right around my first CD was, I'm pretty sure it was Green Day Dookie. It would have been like Green Day Dookie or Offspring Smash, whichever one of those came out first. This is kind of funny because again, that punk rock was, I didn't realize either of those were kind of punk rock bands, and even Green Day Dookie is very questionable on if that is even still punk rock, I guess, anymore, but coming from that era. I remember my parents got their first CD player, the big friggin' six discs changer that you can plug in there with the catalog in there. Was able to start buying CDs. A lot of like old 70s rock, like Chilliwack, which I just about went and saw last night. That would have been so good. But I've seen them before, and just the price of those tickets for a band that's their heyday was, like before I was even born. I'm 44 years old. So it was hard to do. I've seen them before. It was an awesome experience. And I just thought, and I would not have regretted it had I gone to see Chilliwack. But I just, just not for the price of admission. I guess it wasn't for me. And this way, at least my memory of getting to see them live is like a positive memory. But right in and around the time of these CDs, I remember also doing a family trip. And this is before you had CD players in cars. We had tape deck in the car, and we needed music. And I remember buying Bryan Adams' Cuts Like a Knife and Aerosmith Toys in the Attic. And so Bryan Adams, was already a huge fan of him, as I said, as a kid. That was kind of my first big guy. But Toys in the Attic, I'd heard like a couple Aerosmith songs like Walk This Way and a few others. All of a sudden I had stuff like the song Adam's Apple. I had Sweet Emotion, which still to this day is one of my absolute favorite rock and roll songs. And so this is the kind of stuff I was listening to and buying for myself, in around the grade 5 years, I would say, is in around there. So you had like some classic, awesome rock. Yeah, a little bit of more modernish punk rock for the time. And, and then after that, I remember Ace of Base was cool. And I just, it's all good, Fluff. I see you there, brother. Hope you're doing well. So, and then you like I remember hearing about Ace of Base, and I didn't know anything about it, right? I didn't listen to much music, that which was our Canadian equivalent to MTV. And so I go into the CD store downtown and I buy Ace of Base. And it wasn't really my thing. I'm not gonna lie, I will jam the sign still to this day. And I think the song was it All That She Wants, is that the other song? But yeah, the rest of that album is pretty horrible. And that is like one of the few times that I've actually caved into public. It wasn't no peer pressure. It was just a cool thing that everybody was listening to, and I didn't even know what it was. And so I bought it, and it was like, like I said, I'm not gonna lie, there's two songs I like on there, and they're pretty decent, but the rest of it was pretty horrible. So it's like, I remember thinking I got to kind of maybe just know something about CDs, because it's not like I can go buy a new CD every week or every day or anything like that. Like, I was fucking, especially at that point when you're in like grade 6 or whatever. So this is some of my. As for metal itself, it was like I remember like Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard. Now, and Motley Crue, can we even call those bands heavy metal by today's standards in metal? I don't know, and that would probably be a really good conversation for another day. But that was kind of my earliest exposure to that, but to actual like stuff that I still think would stand up as metal today would be like the Ice-T album, Freedom of Speech. And they've got the song on there, The Girl Tried to Kill Me, which is Body Count. Back in 1980, was it 89 or 1987 that album was released? I think it was 89, 87, one of those years. And I was kind of, I didn't know anything about Body Count back in those days. They weren't even a band that was announced at that time. It took another, I think the first Body Count album was like 92, 93 or somewhere around there. But that was like my first time hearing that. But then also fast forward a little bit more to right around those grade 6, 7 years. That's when that Body Count album came out. Now, I didn't realize Body Count was a separate band from Ice-T. Ice-T was one of those, like, he swore. My brother had his tapes. He swore, and I thought it was cool as hell. That was kind of why I liked him, right? And then the Body Count album comes out. It's got Cop Killer on there, and it raised a huge thing. And my buddy Lance, back in like grade 6, I think it was, handed me a dubbed recorded tape of most of that album. I'd say probably about 2/3 of that album. There was a couple songs that weren't on there, but we had like Cop Killer was on there, Evil Dick was on there, Body Count album or anthem was on there, song Body Count was on there. It was just, and I just thought it was an Ice-T album. The fact that it was heavy guitars and drum beats didn't even occur to me. I just thought, like all albums sound a little bit different, unless you're AC/DC, which I didn't even know that at the time. But like I just thought I didn't realize he had a heavy metal band going on out there. But I think that would be my first exposure to what heavy metal that would still be considered heavy metal today in this day and age. Whereas you look at Guns N' Roses now, they're like classic rock, and they definitely deserve to be there. So it's kind of, how do you take that, I guess? And yeah, how's everybody in there doing there? What's some of your guys'? So I see we got at least a couple people hanging out with me, and I appreciate y'all coming in and hanging out. What's your guys' first favorites? Like, I'm not who's your favorite today. When you first got listening to music, let me know in the live chat, or if you're watching this later, let me know in the comments down below. What was your favorite first song or favorite songs, favorite bands that got you into listening to music? Because what got me into music now, or into music all those years ago when I was like, say, 5 years old, is a lot different than what I listen to mostly in this day and age. And I'm just kind of curious, are you listening to a lot of the same stuff or have you swapped it up? Because getting into high school, that's where you kind of start to forge your own identity and you're starting to get opened up to stuff. I remember in grade 8 going to my buddy Justin's house, and his older brother John had the Pantera Cowboys from Hell album. Now, at this point, I'd heard a little bit about heavy metal. Most of my intro to metal actually back it up even a few years to like grade 5, 6 ish, somewhere around there was that Beavis and Butthead album. So I had Megadeth, White Zombie. Geez, I'm blanking on it. Who else? Anthrax was on there. Primus was on there. We don't know if they're metal, but they're freaking awesome. There's like a whole bunch of metal stuff on there, and without even realizing you're listening to metal, you are. But I was actually jamming quite a bit of that stuff frequently. The White Zombie song freaked me out. I am hell. I'm not gonna lie. To be in like grade 6 and there's a song where the guy's like, "I am hell." I was like, yeah, I wasn't down with that. But yeah, no, that was a great album. Also, like had Aerosmith on that one too. But anyways, like I said, I go over to my buddy Justin's house, and his brother had Pantera Cowboys from Hell, and that was just, what is this? Like the opening, it was like, this is my introduction to true, full-on, actual heavy metal. I didn't know it at the time. I was not warned ahead of time. It was, and if you think about it, man, like the intro riff to Cowboys from Hell, we get that before they go into the actual riff, man. And you think about it, if like that is your introduction to true, full-on, actual heavy metal, does it get any better than that? Does that maybe explain why Cowboys from Hell, the song, is probably my favorite song? Like, it very well might be my favorite song of all time. It doesn't ever get old for me. There's probably a handful of songs that are probably would compete for that spot as my favorite of all time. But it is absolutely up there. And then this is around the same time where Metallica's Black Album, you get into that because it's I mean, hey, this is what the kids are listening to. And also, I remember Marilyn Manson's Antichrist Superstar gets released. Now, I didn't have access to get my hands on music at that point, or heavy metal music at that point in time. Like I said, I had friends that had their brothers or they had CDs and tapes and stuff like that. Nothing actually really in my collection. And then I got a hold of my brother's Metallica's Black Album, I remember, and recording that on to a side of a tape for like one of those 90-minute blank tapes. The other side was Marilyn Manson's Antichrist Superstar. I remember labeling that mixtape heavy metal, knowing full well there was only 2 albums on it, but like that was all I had access to at that point in time. I was very proud of that heavy metal tape, even though it was only 2 albums that aren't necessarily really even all those heavy. Marilyn Manson, when he released Antichrist Superstar, was the first album that came out within, not my lifetime, but within like, I was already knew about them. It was like the first album that wasn't released before my time that actually felt like, yeah, this was released for me. This album spoke to me. That album changed my life in a lot of ways and turned me on into like dark music and stuff. And is I might have to put that on. I to be honest, I can't listen to it, a lot of it today. Well, no, I can listen to it, but I can't listen to it over and over. Like I put that album on once, maybe I listen to it twice, and after that, it can go away for a good long while, except for a few songs off of it. But I think in terms of impact and what it's actually did for me going through those teenage years, I think that's like might be one of my top 10 albums of all time, to be honest. It was a huge one for me. So I remember getting to see him live for the first time was huge. I was traveling home, like I was in my 30s at this point in time, traveling home, working out of town, had like a 12-hour drive to get home. And I was about halfway through that drive. And my wife at the time, ex-wife now, she sends me a message saying that, if I detoured and went to the town I was born and raised in instead of coming home to where we were living, she could get me a ticket to see Marilyn Manson. Downside, I would have to go by myself, which is kind of like, oh, but at the same time, it was like one of those, you know what? This guy meant the world to me for a good solid year, probably. And I kind of lost interest in him as soon as Mechanical Animals came out. It took me years for that album to grow on me. I fucking love that album now, but it took a long time. But anyways, I just like if I don't go see him, even if it's by myself, I will. I will absolutely regret it. And I go and see the show, and it wasn't good. Like it was cool to see these songs that I grew up listening to, but it was not a good performance. He just kind of rolled around on the stage. It was just like, I remember walking away thinking like, well, it was cool. Let's see the songs, but as for a live performance, not great. I've seen him twice since then, and both times since then he was phenomenal, including just like not even 2 months ago at Sick New World in Vegas. And he was awesome. He killed it. And saw him about 2 years ago in Calgary as well. And he was honestly, I thought he was better than Metallica was the night before when we saw them. So you get that. This is around the time where, so as I'm getting into stuff like Marilyn Manson, I'm already a little into Pantera, Metallica. It's kind of my intro to heavy metal. And this is where you start getting into like White Zombie a little bit more. I remember my friend Chris's cousin had the Astro Creep 2000 album where you have More Human Than Human on there. Still to this day, one of my absolute favorite songs of all time. Love to jam on that. And you're growing different styles of music. You're aware it's all heavy, and it's different. You're just like, wow, like there's it's all the same and heavy, but it's all completely different in sounding. And really enjoying it. This was around time where I was introduced to albums like Rust in Peace for Megadeth. Took years for that one to grow on me. Earlier, Metallica, because up till this point, I'd only really heard the Black Album. But then you're getting to go back and hear like stuff like Seek and Destroy, which is probably my favorite Metallica song. And Justice for All, Master of Puppets, all that good stuff. Like, wow. Like there's a lot of really good heavy metal music that was made before I was even alive. Now you just got to search it out. Unfortunately for me and a lot of us back in those days and age, those tapes and CDs, that's what we had. If we would have known that like 15 years, I don't even think it was 20, maybe 20 years later, we would have things like Spotify going on where, once again, just put it all on here. You could just like and have access to whatever music you wanted. Imagine that. Because this is even before like things like LimeWire and Napster. Kazo is another one where you started getting into torrents, which was huge. And I was definitely that kid that would sit there for hours on end downloading songs, trying to complete full albums from certain bands and stuff like that. It was great. Before I get out, I'm gonna wrap this up here soon. But I remember I'll leave you with a finishing Pantera thought moment. So I had heard Pantera's Cowboys from Hell album, and I loved it. Like I said, that might be my possibly my introduction to full-on true heavy metal. The song Cowboys from Hell the Way intros might be the perfect intro to that kind of thing. But Vulgar Display of Power is my favorite Pantera album. And I remember listening to hearing that for the first time. And we were partying at my friend Greg's house. And I drank too much, as often was my case when I at the young age. I remember passing out. And before they had left, they had played that album. They put that album on for me to give me some music to listen to while I was trying to sleep, because they're good friends. That music just cranked, and the song "Walk" would come on, and I'd lay there listening to it on the floor, kind of with pillow blankets and all that stuff. And the song would end, and I would get up physically, lay back down, listen to it, and I think it was for about an hour. Just laying there and drunk, passed out teenager listening to the song Walk by Pantera. And this is kind of, one of the formations of what would eventually turn me into a huge, massive Pantera fan. I'm going to come back and do this again next week. And we're going to get into the new metal era of things, with where I was really starting to forge my musical identities. A lot of the stuff that I'd listened to up to this point was stuff that was introduced to me by other people. And like I said, the only thing in there that was actually mine to this point was Marilyn Manson's Antichrist Superstar. Everything else was other people. So introducing to me. And so we'll get into more of that and break this up into a little bit more of a series. Get out of here. We're see Galaxy in there, Fluff in there. I want to thank you guys for coming in and hanging out with me. We'll be back next week, and thank you all later. Cheers, everyone. May the power of heavy metal compel you. Cheers.